Alien war hero shocks comrades with harsh truths about humans. The war was over. After 18 long cycles of fire, loss, and endless darkness, the Kovani Empire had finally defeated the Reinar Swarm. The last enemy hive ship burned above the broken world of Talos 7, drifting in pieces through silent space. Billions of lives had been saved. 4 civilizations had already fallen to the swarm before this. The Kovani had been next. Now, against all odds, they were still alive. On the observation deck of the flagship Eternal Radiance, warriors crowded together in celebration. Scales of green, gold, and silver shimmered under starlight. Cups of bright victory wine were raised high. Songs of triumph echoed through the metal halls. Some warriors laughed so loudly that tears ran down their faces. Many had believed they would never see this day. But Commander Vexoran did not laugh. He stood alone near the wide viewport, his 4 eyes fixed on the stars beyond the glass. His aged green scales were marked with scars from wars long past. His hands rested against the cold surface as if he needed the chill to steady himself. Behind him, his name was being shouted in praise. "Commander Vexoran, hero of the Empire!" He did not turn. He had fought in many wars. He had seen victory before, but this one felt different. This one did not sit easily in his heart. The door slid open quietly. He heard light footsteps approach. "Commander," Lieutenant Kirasol said softly. She was young, her silver scales smooth and bright. No deep scars yet, no heavy history. She carried a cup of glowing purple wine and held it out to him. "You should join them. The High Council has already sent word. They are calling you the greatest war hero of our age." Vexoran took the cup but did not drink. He turned it slowly in his hand. "War hero," he repeated. The words felt heavy. "You led us to victory," Kira insisted. "Without you, the swarm would have consumed us." Vexoran finally turned to look at her. There was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Not doubt, not regret, fear. "I did not win this war," he said quietly. "I was present when it ended. That is not the same thing." Kira frowned slightly. "Commander, every final order came from you. The fleet followed your strategy." Vexoran gave a low, humorless chuckle. "Let me ask you something, Lieutenant. Do you remember when the humans arrived?" Her posture stiffened slightly. Of course she remembered. The coalition had called for help from every allied world. Heavy cruisers had come, psychic warriors had come, entire battle groups had joined. And then Earth had sent 37 soldiers. 37, against a swarm that numbered in billions. The High Council had been furious. Some had called it an insult. Soft-skinned creatures, no claws, no natural weapons. They required special air to breathe and strict temperature control to survive. By all known measures of galactic biology, humans were fragile. No one expected anything from them. "They were effective," she said carefully, "more than expected. But surely you do not believe 37 humans won this war." Vexoran set the untouched wine on the ledge. "I need to speak to the senior officers." "Now?" "Yes, tonight." They walked back through the celebration. Warriors reached out to touch his shoulders in respect. He acknowledged them, but his expression remained distant. "They deserve the truth," he said quietly as they moved, "about how this war truly ended, about what I saw the humans do." Kira felt a strange coldness crawl through her scales. "The truth about what?" she asked. Vexoran stopped at the doorway and looked at her directly. "They need to understand what we have welcomed into this galaxy." His voice dropped lower. "Because if we do not understand humans while they still call us friends, we may not survive learning it when they do not." The door slid open. The celebration sounds faded behind them. And for the first time since the war had ended, Lieutenant Kirasol felt afraid of something that was not the enemy. What could 37 fragile beings possibly have done to make a war hero fear them more?
Word spread through the flagship faster than a plasma fire. Commander Vexoran and one of the senior officers gathered immediately. At first, the warriors thought it was another victory announcement, maybe a final speech, maybe an honor ceremony. But when they saw the commander's face, tight, pale beneath his scales, eyes distant, they stopped smiling. Something was wrong. Within minutes, the tactical briefing chamber was full. 43 officers stood in neat rows. Some were hardened veterans with dull, faded scales. Others were younger, promoted quickly during the desperate final cycles of war. All of them were silent. Lieutenant Kira Sol stood near the front, her heart beating strangely fast. Commander Vexoran stepped into the center of the room. He did not speak right away. He looked at each officer slowly, one by one, as if memorizing them. These were his people, his soldiers, his family. They trusted him with their lives. That trust made what he was about to say feel like a blade against his own chest. Finally, he began. Many of you remember when the human transport arrived. A few officers shifted, uncomfortable. Vexoran continued, voice calm but heavy. 37 soldiers. That was Earth's entire contribution to the coalition war. Some officers made quiet sounds of irritation. They all remembered the embarrassment, the High Council's anger, the long diplomatic messages demanding an explanation. How dare the humans show up with so few? I was there, Vexoran said, when their commander stepped off the transport. I was sent to deliver the High Council's official protest. He paused. I was ready to insult them. I was ready to tell them their pathetic offering would not be forgotten. Kira watched his jaw tighten, as if the memory still burned. The human commander was a female, he said. Her name was Kate Morrison. Several officers leaned forward. She was small. Her head barely reached my chest. Her skin was pink, no armor plating, no scales, no claws. Her eyes were the color of forest leaves. She wore combat gear that looked like it would tear if I struck it. A few officers scoffed. Vexoran didn't react. I told her 37 soldiers was an insult. I told her the fate of the galaxy was at stake. I told her the Reinar Swarm had consumed 4 civilizations. He stopped pacing and stood still. And then I asked her how Earth dared to send so few. The room became so quiet, Kira could hear her own breathing. Vexoran looked around. Do you know what she said? No one answered. Vexoran's voice lowered, as if speaking the words made him feel sick. She smiled. Not an apology, not fear, a real smile. He swallowed. And she said, very calmly, he paused again, letting the tension build. Commander, 37 is more than enough. Just point us at the enemy. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. One older officer made a sound of anger. Another shook his head. Kira felt her stomach tighten. That wasn't courage. That sounded like madness. Vexoran nodded slowly, as if reading their thoughts. I thought she was insane, he admitted. I reported to the High Council that Earth's contribution was worthless. His eyes darkened. For weeks, I ignored them. I had fleets to command. I had real soldiers to manage. I did not waste time thinking about 37 soft creatures who believed they could matter. He exhaled slowly. Then the siege of Talos 7 began. The entire room changed. Every officer remembered Talos 7. It had been the worst battle of the war. The swarm had thrown everything at that planet. If the defensive line broke, billions of civilians below would be eaten alive. For 37 days, the coalition fought without rest. Ships burned faster than they could be replaced. Warriors died by the thousands. Vexoran's voice became sharper. On the 19th day, I received a request from Kate Morrison. He looked at them. She wanted to meet. She said she had a tactical proposal.
A younger officer muttered, "A proposal from humans?" Vexoran ignored the comment. "I almost refused," he said. "I was exhausted, angry, and I did not want to waste time." He paused, but something made me agree. Kira saw his hands clench slightly. "Morrison entered my command center with 2 officers, a male named Danny Russo and a female named Megan Price. He activated the holotable, and the image of a massive Reinar carrier appeared in the air. The enemy ship looked like a living nightmare, organic armor, ugly weapons, and thick plates grown from flesh. That carrier, Vexoran said, was the heart of their defensive perimeter." His voice turned bitter. "We had already lost 14 capital ships trying to destroy it." A low murmur moved through the room. 8,000 warriors, he added. Silence returned. Kira felt her throat tighten. She remembered those names, those funerals. Vexoran stared at the carrier image. Morrison looked at that ship and said 5 words I will never forget. He turned to face them. She said, his voice dropped into something colder, "We will board that ship." The room erupted in shocked sounds. One officer laughed in disbelief, another cursed. Someone whispered, "Suicide." Vexoran lifted his hand, and the room fell silent again. "I told her it was impossible," he said. "I told her boarding that carrier would be murder." He stepped closer to the hollow image, and she smiled again. Kira's scales felt cold. She said, "Commander, impossible just means no one has done it yet." Vexoran's eyes narrowed. Then she said, "Give us a shuttle and 12 hours. If we fail, you lose nothing but 37 soldiers you never wanted. If we succeed, the siege ends." The room was frozen. Kira could barely breathe. Vexoran looked down for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, full of shame. "I agreed." He lifted his eyes. "I told myself I had nothing to lose." His jaw tightened. I was wrong. He took one slow step forward. I had no idea what I had just unleashed.
Commander Vexoran stood beside the holotable, staring at the image of the Reinar carrier as if it was still alive. The room stayed silent. No one wanted to interrupt him now. He looked up at the officers. "You want to know how?" he said, voice low. "How fragile creatures could do what we could not." He tapped the control panel. A recording appeared in the air. The video showed space above Talos 7. Ships burned in the distance. The Coalition fleet was battered, barely holding the line. Then, from the side of the Kovani flagship, a small shuttle detached. It looked tiny, almost laughable, like an escape pod, not a war vessel. "That was their shuttle," Vexoran said. "The humans insisted on using their own." The shuttle accelerated. It shot toward the enemy carrier like a dart. Kira watched the recording, her heart tightening. The shuttle weaved between blasts of enemy fire. The Reinar defenses filled the void with deadly light. "It was hit 17 times, Vexoran said quietly. The officers stared. "Its shields failed after the 9th hit," he continued. "Engines failed after the 14th. The shuttle began to burn. Metal peeled away. Smoke and debris spun into space." One officer muttered, "They were dead before they reached it." Vexoran didn't deny it. The recording showed the shuttle breaking apart completely, and then Kira's breath caught. From the wreckage, 6 small figures emerged, humans. They were wearing armored suits, sealed tight for vacuum. Their bodies looked like tiny insects compared to the massive carrier ahead. And they jumped. "They left the shuttle," Vexoran said, "in open space." The room was frozen in shock. "They jumped into the void and kept going."
The recording showed the 6 humans tumbling through darkness, their thrusters firing in short bursts. Enemy weapons tried to track them, but they were too small, too fast, too unpredictable. A bright flash. 2 humans were hit. Their shields tore open. Their bodies spun away into the darkness like broken dolls. Kira felt her stomach twist. They didn't even scream. The recording had no sound from them, just silent death. 4 humans reached the carrier's hull. 4, Vexoran repeated. 4 humans against a ship carrying 40,000 Reinar warriors. He paused, voice rough. Their names were Danny Russo, Megan Price, Victor Campos, and Lisa Novak. Kira noticed how carefully he said those names, like he was forcing himself not to forget them. The video showed the 4 humans cutting through the hull with plasma torches. A bright line burned through the living armor. They pulled themselves inside. Then the external cameras lost them. The recording ended. Vexoran deactivated the holo table. For the next 9 hours, he said, I listened to their channel. The room remained silent, but the air felt heavier. What I heard, Vexoran continued, still wakes me in my sleep. He began pacing slowly. The humans did not try to fight 40,000 enemies head-on. He looked around. They were not foolish. They knew they could not win a normal battle. His voice grew colder. So, they became something else. He stopped. They became hunters. A shiver ran through Kira's scales. Vexoran continued, describing it in a voice that sounded almost haunted. They moved through the carrier like ghosts. They used the enemy's own technology. They set traps. They destroyed systems, then waited in darkness for repair crews. He took a breath. When search parties came, the humans let themselves be seen. Some officers frowned. That sounded like suicide. Vexoran's eyes narrowed. Then they led them into ambush. His voice sharpened. They poisoned air supplies. They sealed corridors. They rigged doors to explode. They created panic. Kira imagined it. 4 small beings in an endless ship, surrounded by monsters, yet still choosing to play with their prey. Vexoran's hands curled into fists. For 9 hours, he said, 4 humans terrorized 40,000 warriors. A younger officer whispered, Impossible. Vexoran's expression hardened. They killed hundreds, then thousands. He paused, and when they ran out of ammunition, he looked at them, eyes burning. They used knives. Kira swallowed hard. And when the knives broke, they used pieces of metal torn from the walls. The room was silent, except for someone breathing too fast. Vexoran's voice grew rougher. Victor Campos was wounded so badly he could not walk. Do you know what he did? No one answered. He told the others to leave him behind. Vexoran stared at the floor for a moment. They gave him a grenade. He stayed alone in a junction corridor and fought until the end. Kira felt her chest tighten. She pictured him, bleeding, alone, surrounded, still refusing to surrender. Then Vexoran spoke again. Lisa Novak died sealing a door behind her teammates. His voice lowered. She trapped herself in a corridor with 200 Reinar. A few officers made small sounds of horror. Kira's eyes widened. Vexoran swallowed. Her final transmission, he said, was laughter. The room went cold. She was laughing, he repeated, as if he couldn't understand it, as they tore her apart. Kira felt sick, not just from fear, from confusion. Why would someone laugh at death? Vexoran returned to the holo table and activated it again. A new recording appeared. It showed Danny Russo and Megan Price limping through a corridor. Their suits were damaged. Their oxygen warning lights blinked red.
They reached the reactor core with 17 minutes of oxygen left. The recording showed them planting explosives. Then the image jumped. A massive glow spread through the carrier. The entire ship exploded from within. The defensive perimeter collapsed instantly. Enemy ships drifted without coordination. The siege line broke. The room watched in silence as the impossible happened. Vexoran shut the recording off. Megan Price did not make it out, he said quietly. Kira felt her throat tighten. She died 2 corridors from the breach point. Vexoran's voice grew heavy, and Danny Russo carried her body as far as he could go before he had to let go. Kira felt tears sting her eyes, even though she tried to stay strong. And we found him, Vexoran continued, floating in wreckage 3 hours later. He looked around, unconscious, bleeding, nearly dead. He paused. His suit had been punctured 11 times. Kira whispered, almost without meaning to, "How did he survive?" Vexoran's eyes darkened. He sealed each puncture with emergency patches. He hesitated, made from the bodies of dead Reinar. A ripple of horror ran through the room. Vexoran stood very still. When Russo woke up, he said, the first thing he asked was whether the carrier was destroyed. The officers listened. When we said yes, he smiled. Vexoran's voice broke slightly. Then he asked how many of his team survived. He took a breath. When we told him he was the only one, he did not cry. Kira's chest hurt. He did not scream. He simply nodded and said, "They died well. That's all any of us can ask for." The room stayed silent for a long time. Then Vexoran faced them again. 4 humans destroyed a carrier our entire fleet could not touch. His voice was sharp now. 4 humans ended a siege that had already cost us 8,000 warriors. He paused, and they did it because no one had told them they could not. Kira could see it now. This wasn't bravery. This wasn't honor. This was something far more dangerous. If humans could do this with just 4 soldiers, what happened when they truly joined the war in full? And what terrifying truth did Vexoran learn next?
The briefing chamber stayed silent. No one wanted to be the first to speak after hearing how 4 humans had torn open an enemy carrier from the inside. Kira could feel the fear in the room, thick like smoke. Finally, senior tactician Morveth, old, gray-scaled, and respected, raised his hand. "With great respect, Commander," Morveth said carefully, "we all saw the humans fight. Yes, they were effective, but you speak as if they were something beyond reason." He swallowed. "How can 4 fragile beings do what fleets cannot?" Vexoran looked at Morveth for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, only sadness. "Tell me," Vexoran said quietly, "how many ships did we lose trying to break that perimeter before the humans acted?" Morveth answered immediately, 14 capital ships. "And how many warriors?" Vexoran asked. 8,000. Vexoran nodded. "Now tell me," he continued, voice firm, "how did we finally break the defensive line?" Morveth didn't answer. No one did, because everyone knew the humans broke it. Vexoran walked slowly to the front of the room. "Humans do not fight like we do," he said. His voice lowered. "They do not fight like any species in this galaxy." He looked at the officers one by one. "We have rules. We have codes. We have honor. When a battle is decided, we accept it." He clenched his jaw. "The Reinar fight with numbers. The Kryn fight with minds. The Thii fight with machines." He paused. "Every species has a pattern." Then his eyes darkened. "Humans have no pattern."
Kira felt her breath catch. They lie, they cheat, they adapt, they change their tactics mid-battle without hesitation. He took a slow breath. They will crawl through fire with broken bones to complete a mission. Some younger officers stared at him like he was exaggerating. Vexoran's gaze sharpened. They will sacrifice themselves, not for honor, but for spite. The word hung in the air. Spite. A concept many Kovani understood, but never in war. Spite was personal, ugly, emotional. Yet humans carried it like a weapon. And the worst part, Vexoran said, voice quieter, the part that truly terrifies me. He paused. They enjoy it. A cold silence spread. Kira saw several officers look away, disturbed. Then a young officer stepped forward, Talvex, bright blue scales, noble family, newly promoted, confident in a way only youth could be. "Commander," Talvex said, "surely you exaggerate." His voice held polite doubt. "Yes, humans are remarkable, but they are still weak creatures. They require temperature control. They sleep for a third of their lives. Their bones break easily." He spread his hands slightly. "How can such fragile beings truly be so dangerous?" The room held its breath. Vexoran stared at Talvex. For a moment, Kira thought he might snap at him. But instead, Vexoran's expression softened, like a tired father looking at a child who still believed the world was fair. "Let me tell you what I witnessed in the tunnels of Kryn 4, Vexoran said. Kira felt a chill. Kryn 4. Everyone remembered that mission, one of the bloodiest ground battles of the war. Vexoran began pacing again. The assault on Kryn 4 happened in the 5th cycle of the war. The Reinar had established a breeding nest deep beneath the surface. He looked around. If we did not destroy it, they would produce enough new drones to overwhelm our defensive lines within 3 months. Several officers nodded. Vexoran's jaw tightened. "We sent 2,000 warriors into those tunnels." His voice turned darker. "We expected heavy resistance." He paused. "We did not expect the Reinar to collapse the main entrance behind us." A ripple went through the room. Kira's hands tightened into fists. Vexoran continued. 60 of us survived the collapse. 60 warriors trapped underground in a maze of tunnels. His eyes narrowed. Our communications were destroyed, our heavy weapons buried. No way to call for help. He stopped pacing. No way to escape. The chamber was silent. Vexoran's voice grew softer, almost ashamed. "We accepted our deaths." Kira's heart sank. That is what Kovani warriors do when defeat is certain. We began our ritual chant. We prepared our souls for the afterworld. He looked up. There were 3 humans with us. Murmurs rose. Only 3. Observers, a gesture of alliance. A medic named Sam Delgado. A combat engineer named Hannah Torres. He paused. And their squad leader, Chris Hartley. Vexoran's eyes changed. Something like wonder appeared. "Hartley watched us prepare to die," Vexoran said. "He listened to our chants." Then Vexoran shook his head, still unable to believe it. And then he laughed. A few officers made sounds of offense. To laugh at death rituals was deeply disrespectful in Kovani culture. "It was not mockery," Vexoran said quickly. "It was confusion." He looked at Kira briefly. Hartley looked at me and said, "Commander, what are you doing? We're not dead yet." Kira felt her throat tighten. Vexoran continued. "I told him the situation was hopeless, trapped, outnumbered, no weapons." He paused, and Hartley shook his head. Vexoran's voice dropped lower, repeating the words as if they had burned into his mind. He said, Nobody is dying today except the bugs." The room was frozen. Kira's pulse hammered. Then Vexoran continued, voice stronger now. He gave orders like he was already in control. He imitated the human's tone, rough and confident. "Sam, patch up whoever's bleeding. Hannah, turn those mining charges into directional explosives. Everyone else follow me." Vexoran stopped pacing, and then he said, his voice sharpened, "We're going to make them regret ever crawling down here." Kira felt something twist inside her. That wasn't a soldier. That was a predator. Vexoran looked around the room. "For 66 hours, he said, those 3 humans led us through those tunnels." His voice became almost quiet with disbelief. "They did not fight like warriors." He took a slow breath. "They fought like hunters." Kira's mind filled with images, dark tunnels, blood, broken armor, and humans moving forward anyway. Vexoran continued. Hartley could look at a tunnel and see what it could become. He held up a hand. A narrow passage became a choke point. A collapse became a trap. A chemical storage room became poison. His eyes darkened. When Hartley ran out of ammunition, he did not panic. He paused. He picked up a broken support beam. Kira's eyes widened. "I watched him kill 11 Reinar drones with that piece of metal." The room was dead silent. Vexoran's voice grew softer again. "Hannah Torres was wounded early. A drone tore open her side." He swallowed. "Do you know what she did?" No one spoke. "She took her plasma cutting tool and cauterized her own wound." Kira felt sick. "I could smell her flesh burning," Vexoran said. His eyes narrowed. "She sealed the wound, then went back to building traps." The officer stared in horror. "And Sam Delgado saved 12 Kovani lives that day." He shook his head. He refused to let soldiers die, not because he was ordered to, but because he decided they would live. Vexoran stopped pacing. "We lost 9 warriors in those tunnels." His voice was heavy. 9. Kira blinked. "Only 9? "We should have lost all 60, Vexoran said. "Every tactical calculation said we would die." He lifted his eyes. "But humans do not care about calculations." His voice dropped lower. "They only care about survival." Kira could see Talvex now. His bright blue scales had faded slightly. His confidence was cracking. Vexoran looked directly at Talvex. "When rescue finally reached us, they found Hartley carrying Sam on his back." He paused. Sam had lost consciousness, blood loss. Vexoran's voice grew sharper. "Any other soldier would have left him behind." Kira swallowed. But Hartley refused. Vexoran leaned forward slightly. "He carried him for 2 hours through hostile tunnels, while still firing his weapon." The room felt like it had stopped breathing. "And when I thanked him, do you know what he told me?" He hesitated, as if the words still made no sense. He said, "Don't."
The nervous laughter faded. The room fell silent again, heavier than before. Commander Vexoran stood in the center, staring at his officers like he was trying to push a truth into their minds by force. "I could tell you more," he said. His voice was calm but tired, like he had carried these stories alone for too long. "I could tell you about the human sniper, Ray Cortez, who held a mountain pass for 18 hours with a broken leg." A few officers blinked in disbelief. "I could tell you about the pilot, Natalie Webb, who flew her damaged fighter directly into a Reinar troop transport when her weapons failed, because she refused to let the enemy reach a civilian colony." Kira felt her chest tighten. "I could tell you about Derek Okono, an engineer who repaired a reactor breach with his bare hands." His voice dropped lower. He knew the radiation would kill him, but his ship carried 3,000 refugees. If the power failed, they would all die.
The room stayed frozen. Vexoran looked around slowly. "Every human I met during this war had a story like that," he said. His eyes darkened, not because they were special among their kind. He paused, but because that is what humans are. Kira felt her heart sink. This wasn't about one heroic team. This was a whole species. Vexoran stepped forward. "They refuse to accept limits," he said. "They look at impossible situations and treat them like puzzles." His jaw tightened. "And when they cannot win," he looked at them with something close to dread, "they make sure the enemy pays such a terrible price that victory feels like defeat." The officers didn't move. Even Talvex, the young noble officer, was quiet now. His blue scales had faded into a sickly gray tone. Vexoran walked toward the viewport at the side of the room. Beyond the glass, wreckage still drifted in the void. Broken enemy ships tumbling slowly, dead and hollow. A graveyard stretching across space. Vexoran stared at it for a long time. Then he spoke again. "I did not gather you here to praise humans," he said quietly. He turned back. "I gathered you here to warn you." The word warning hit Kira like ice. Vexoran's voice became firmer. "In 37 humans, I witnessed more creativity, more adaptability, and more terrifying determination than in all the armies of the Kovani Empire." He held up one hand. 37 soldiers, that is all Earth sent." He paused, "and those 37 changed the course of the war." Kira watched his face. He wasn't exaggerating. He looked like someone confessing a truth he hated. Vexoran began walking slowly along the line of officers. "Earth has billions of humans. Billions." His voice grew heavier. "They have been fighting each other for their entire history." Kira felt something twist in her stomach. Fighting each other for their whole history? Vexoran nodded as if reading her thoughts. "War is not new to them. It is not sacred. It is not honorable." He clenched his fists. "It is something they have practiced, perfected, studied." He stopped in front of Morveth, the senior tactician. "The Reinar Swarm consumed 4 civilizations before we stopped them. 4 ancient peoples erased from existence." The older officers lowered their eyes. Billions of lives, cultures gone forever. The Swarm had nearly done the same to the Kovani. "For 18 cycles, we fought with everything we had, and we were still losing." His voice sharpened. "Then the humans truly committed." Tira blinked. "Truly committed?" "Not the 37. Those were specialists, scouts, observers." He paused. "They were sent to evaluate our tactics, to learn the enemy." Kira's eyes widened. So Earth hadn't been insulting them. Earth had been studying. Vexoran's gaze hardened. "Once the humans understood the Swarm," he said, "they sent recommendations back to Earth." His voice dropped. "And then Earth sent more soldiers. Not millions, not fleets, just more." "Not many more," Vexoran admitted. "A few hundred." He took a breath. "But those few hundred changed everything." The room stayed silent. Kira's mind raced. How could a few hundred matter in a war with billions? Vexoran answered before she could even ask. "In the final 3 months of the war, after humans became fully active," he paused, "the Reinar lost 90% of their remaining forces." The chamber reacted instantly. Officers gasped. Morveth's eyes widened. Talvex looked stunned. 90%? Someone whispered. Vexoran nodded once. "Breeding nests we had been unable to locate for cycles were suddenly destroyed." He began listing it like a report, but his voice carried fear underneath. "Supply lines we could not cut were suddenly severed. Ships that held our fleet in place were suddenly exploding from within. He turned toward the officers again. The humans did things we did not ask them to do, he said. Kira felt her throat tighten. They did things we did not even know were possible. His eyes narrowed. They infiltrated enemy positions our best scouts could not reach. He stepped closer. They turned Reinar technology against its creators. Kira's skin prickled. They found weaknesses in the Reinar communication network and exploited them to create chaos. He paused. They didn't just fight. His voice dropped. They hunted. Kira's chest tightened. Now I understood. The carrier mission wasn't a miracle. It was a sample, a warning. Vexoran stepped forward. I am called a war hero, he said. His voice turned bitter. Because I commanded the fleet in the final battle. He looked around. They will give me medals. They will write songs. He shook his head slowly. But the truth, he swallowed hard. The harsh truth I need all of you to understand. The room held its breath. Vexoran's voice became quiet, almost painful. We did not win this war. Kira felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Vexoran's 4 eyes swept across the room. The humans let us believe we helped. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. Kira felt her heart pounding. That sentence was more terrifying than anything he had said so far, because it meant the Kovani Empire, the proudest warriors in their region of the galaxy, had not saved themselves. They had been saved, allowed to survive. Lieutenant Kira Soul finally found her voice. What would you have us do? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Fear them? Fight them? Vexoran let out a quiet laugh. There was no humor in it. Fear them? He said. He nodded. Absolutely. Kira's felt cold. Every thinking being in this galaxy should fear what humans are capable of. He paused. Then he looked directly at Kira. But fight them? His voice became sharp. No. He shook his head once. That would be suicide. Kira swallowed. Vexoran's voice lowered, almost like a warning whispered in the dark. The Reinar had billions of drones. They had conquered 4 civilizations. He took a slow breath. They nearly conquered us. His eyes narrowed, and humans broke them in 3 months. Kira's heart clenched. If we ever went to war with Earth, Vexoran said, we would not last 3 months. He stepped closer. We would not last 3 weeks. The room was frozen. Vexoran's gaze hardened. The humans would find every weakness in our defenses, every flaw in our tactics, every vulnerability in our culture. His voice dropped, and they would exploit all of them without mercy. Kira felt sick. This wasn't fear of death. This was fear of being completely outclassed. Then Vexoran's expression changed slightly, not softer, but more personal. My advice is simple, he said. He looked around at his officers. Be their friends. The room blinked. Be useful to them. Make them laugh. He paused, almost annoyed. They love to laugh, even when their humor makes no sense. A few officers gave weak, nervous smiles. Vexoran nodded. Share food with them. Show interest in their strange customs. He took a slow breath. Become valuable to them. His eyes darkened. Because the only thing more dangerous than a human who hates you, he paused, is a human who has forgotten you exist. Kira felt that sentence settle into her bones. Forgotten, ignored, dismissed. Humans didn't just destroy enemies, they erased them. Vexoran turned toward the door, then stopped.
The next morning, the celebrations were still going. Victory banners covered the halls of the Eternal Radiance. Music echoed through the lower decks. News of the Swarm's defeat had already spread across the Empire. Cities lit their skies with fireworks. temples filled with grateful citizens. But inside the High Council chamber, there was no music, only silence. Commander Vexoran stood alone in the center of the circular room. Above him, tall windows showed the stars drifting quietly past. Around him, 12 council members sat on raised platforms of polished stone. Their scales shone in rich colors, deep gold, royal blue, emerald green, leaders of the empire, politicians, strategists, survivors. At the center sat High Chancellor Relmar, his scales bright and carefully maintained. Unlike Vexoran's, they carried no scars. "Commander Vexoran," Relmar said smoothly, "on behalf of the Kovani Empire, we thank you." Several council members tapped their claws lightly in formal applause. "You have delivered us from extinction. The swarm is broken. The galaxy is safe." Vexoran did not bow. "The swarm is broken," he agreed. A few council members exchanged glances. "But the galaxy is not safe," he added. The room grew still. Relmar's smile faded slightly. "Explain." Vexoran lifted his head. "We did not win this war," he said calmly. A ripple of irritation moved through the council. "Commander," said Councillor Theron sharply, "the fleet reports are clear. Our final assault shattered the enemy." "Our fleet was losing," Vexoran replied. He spoke carefully, respectfully, but firmly. "For 18 cycles, we fought with everything we had. We were still being pushed back." He met the Chancellor's eyes. "Then the humans became fully active." Relmar leaned back slightly. "Ah, yes, our new allies from Earth." His tone was polite, almost amused. "They were helpful." "Helpful." Vexoran felt a small pulse of anger. "They were decisive," he corrected. A few council members frowned. Relmar folded his hands. "Commander, are you suggesting that our victory belongs to Earth? I am stating that without them, we would not be sitting in this chamber." The silence that followed was sharp. Councillor Theron hissed softly. "That is an extreme claim." "It is an accurate one." Vexoran stepped forward slightly. "In the final 3 months of the war, after human intervention increased, the swarm lost 90% of its remaining forces." He let that number sit in the air. "They destroyed breeding nests we could not find. They cut supply lines we could not touch. They infiltrated carriers we could not approach." Relmar's eyes narrowed. "They are creative," he admitted. "We should be grateful." "We should be careful," Vexoran replied. The room shifted again. "Careful," one councillor repeated. "They are allies." "Till now," Vexoran said quietly. A murmur spread through the chamber. Relmar leaned forward. "Commander, you sound almost fearful." Vexoran did not hesitate. "I am." The honesty shocked them more than anger would have. "I have seen what humans do when they decide something must die. I have seen them ignore logic, ignore fear, ignore pain." He swallowed. "They do not fight like us." Relmar tilted his head. "And that is a problem?" "It is a reality," Vexoran answered. "They have no pattern, no limit." Councillor Theron scoffed lightly. "They are fragile creatures, soft skin, weak bodies. They require environmental support to survive on most of our worlds." "Yes," Vexoran agreed. He took a breath. "And yet, they broke a species that conquered 4 civilizations." The room fell quiet again. Relmar studied him. "What are you recommending, Commander?" Vexoran spoke clearly. "Strengthen diplomatic ties, increase cultural exchange, ensure we are valuable to Earth." Several council members exchanged confused looks. "Valuable?" one asked. "Yes." Vexoran's voice grew steady. "Because humans protect what they value." He paused. "And they remove what they do not." A long silence followed. Relmar leaned back in his seat, fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "You believe they will turn on us?" he asked. "I believe," Vexoran said carefully, "that humans always move forward."
He glanced toward the stars beyond the window. They expand, they adapt, they improve. He turned back. They are young, ambitious, curious. He lowered his voice. And they have already proven they can outthink and outfight species older than them. Counselor Theron waved a dismissive hand. They sent a few hundred soldiers, hardly a threat to an empire of billions. Vexoran's eyes hardened. They sent a few hundred because that was all they needed. The words hit harder than he intended. Relmar's gaze sharpened. "Commander," he said slowly, "are you advising that we fear our allies?" "Yes." The word echoed. The council chamber grew tense. Relmar stood. "Fear is not a foundation for diplomacy." "No," Vexoran agreed. "Respect is." He stepped closer to the center. "I do not suggest hostility. I suggest awareness." He paused. "Do not underestimate them. Do not attempt to control them. Do not treat them as lesser." He looked around at each council member. "They will see it." Relmar's expression turned thoughtful. "And if they remain our allies?" he asked. Vexoran allowed himself a small nod. "Then we will have the most powerful friend in the galaxy." A heavy silence lingered. Finally, Relmar exhaled slowly. "We will consider your concerns," he said. The tone was careful, neutral, political. Vexoran recognized it immediately. They were not convinced. The Chancellor stepped down from his platform and approached him. "You are tired," Relmar said quietly, so only he could hear. "You have seen too much war." Vexoran met his eyes. "Yes." Relmar placed a hand on his shoulder. "Rest, Commander. Let the diplomats handle peace." Vexoran wanted to argue, but he knew it would not matter. He bowed slightly, the gesture formal. "As you command." He turned and walked toward the exit. As the door slid open, he heard the council already murmuring among themselves, debating, minimizing, doubting. The door closed behind him. In the corridor, the sounds of celebration still echoed faintly. Vexoran stood still for a long moment. He had delivered the warning, but warnings only mattered if someone listened. Far away, in another part of the ship, human officers were already preparing reports to send back to Earth. Evaluations, recommendations, future plans. The war was over, but for the humans, it might have only been a beginning. And deep in his heart, Commander Vexoran feared one simple truth. The Kovani Empire believed it had survived extinction, but perhaps it had just stepped into a much larger game. While the Council debated and celebrated, what were the humans planning next? And did Earth truly see the Kovani as allies or something else entirely?
The celebrations lasted for 7 days. Across Kovani space, citizens filled the streets. Statues of fallen heroes were raised. Songs were written about the final battle above Talos 7. Commander Vexoran's name was spoken with pride in every corner of the Empire. But in the human sector of the flagship, there were no songs, no banners, no drinking contests, only quiet conversations and glowing screens. Lieutenant Kira Sol did not mean to spy. She had only been curious. After hearing Vexoran's warning, she could not rest. His words echoed in her mind. Be their friends. Be valuable to them. So she went to observe the human deck. It felt different from the rest of the ship. The lights were slightly warmer. The air temperature adjusted to human comfort levels. The walls were covered in strange decorations, small fabric flags, printed photographs, drawings that seemed personal. Humans moved through the halls calmly. Some laughed, some argued softly over datapads. Some drank something dark and steaming from small cups. They did not look like warriors who had just destroyed a galactic threat. They looked busy. Kira paused near an open doorway. Inside, she saw Danny Russo, the survivor of the carrier assault.
He was sitting upright now, one arm still a medical brace, 3 fingers missing from his left hand, his body covered in healing patches, and he was smiling. Across from him sat a human female with short black hair, typing rapidly on a console. "Command wants a full breakdown of Reinar communication structures," she said. Russo nodded. "Send them everything, especially the weak points." Kira's breath caught. "Weak points?" The woman glanced up. "You think they'll adapt?" Russo shrugged slightly. "Everything adapts." He leaned back carefully. "But if they evolve again, we'll be ready." Kira felt a chill. We'll be ready. Not if they come back, when. Another human entered the room. Captain Kate Morrison, the same small woman Vexoran had described. She looked tired, but focused. "Earth confirmed receipt of tactical data," Morrison said. "They're updating fleet designs based on Reinar organic armor." Russo gave a low whistle. That was fast. Morrison nodded. "They've already started simulations for the next threat model." Kira's heart pounded. Next threat? The swarm was gone, wasn't it? Russo looked thoughtful. "Any word from Earth Command about expansion requests?" "Still under review," Morrison replied, "but they're interested in forward research stations near former swarm territory." Kira stepped back slightly. Research stations near dangerous space? Why would they move closer to where extinction had nearly happened? Because humans did not retreat from danger. They studied it. Kira moved away quietly before she was noticed. Her mind raced. The Kovani were celebrating survival. The humans were planning upgrades. That evening, she found Commander Vexoran standing alone near the observation deck again. "You were right," she said quietly. He did not turn. "What did you see?" he asked. "They are not celebrating," Kira said. "They are preparing." Vexoran gave a small nod. "Yes." She stepped closer. "They are already discussing new fleet designs, new tactics, expansion into former swarm territory." Vexoran finally looked at her. "That is what humans do," he said. "They improve." He placed one hand against the viewport. "Every conflict is a lesson to them." Kira swallowed. "So what happens when there is no enemy left?" Vexoran's eyes darkened. "There is always an enemy left," he said softly. Kira hesitated. "Commander, do you think they see us as one?" The question hung in the air. Vexoran was silent for a long moment. "I do not believe so," he said finally. "Why?" she asked. "Because we fought beside them." He looked out at the stars again. "Humans are loyal to those who stand with them." Kira felt some relief, but Vexoran continued. "However," her relief vanished. "They also test boundaries." He turned to her. "If we become weak, divided, irrelevant." He did not finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Kira understood. Humans do not destroy allies. They outgrow them. The next day, a joint ceremony was held. Human officers stood beside Kovani commanders. Medals were exchanged. Speeches were given. Kate Morrison stepped forward when her turn came. She spoke in simple, steady words. "We fought together. We survived together. And we will build together." The crowd applauded. Kira watched carefully. Morrison's eyes scanned the audience, observing, measuring, always thinking. After the ceremony, Morrison approached Vexoran directly. "Commander," she said with a respectful nod. "Captain," Vexoran replied. "You warned your officers about us," Morrison said calmly. Kira froze. How did she know? Vexoran did not deny it. "Yes." Morrison studied him. "Good," she said. The answer shocked Kira. "Why?" Vexoran asked. Morrison's lips curved into a small smile. Because allies who understand each other survive longer. She folded her hands behind her back. You should fear us, Commander. The honesty was almost unsettling. But you should also know something. Vexoran waited. Morrison's eyes softened slightly. Humans protect the people who stand beside them. She paused. And we do not forget who fought with us when things were bad. Kira felt a strange warmth in her chest. Morrison stepped back. But we are explorers, she added, and explorers don't sit still. She turned to leave, then glanced back one last time. The galaxy is bigger than one war. And then she walked away. Kira stood quietly. Do you believe her? She asked Vexoran. He watched the human captain disappear down the corridor. Yes, he said. Does that make you feel better? Vexoran was silent. No, he answered honestly. Kira looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond them, Earth waited. A young world, a dangerous world, a world that had stepped into galactic war and changed it forever. The Kovani Empire had survived extinction, but survival was not the same as control. And as human ships began quietly preparing to travel deeper into unexplored space, one truth became impossible to ignore. The galaxy had not just gained a powerful ally. As human fleets prepared to explore beyond former swarm territory, what would happen when they encountered something even worse? And would the Kovani still stand beside them when that day came?
2 weeks after the victory, the flagship Eternal Radiance finally began its journey home. The wreckage field above Talos 7 was left behind. The Coalition fleet scattered back to their worlds. The Kovani Empire prepared for peace. At least, that was the plan. Lieutenant Kira Sol stood beside Commander Vexoran on the bridge, watching stars stretch into long lines as the ship moved through faster-than-light travel. The bridge was quiet, tired. Even victory had a cost. Most warriors were sleeping for the first time in weeks without fear of alarms. Kira should have felt relief, but she didn't. She kept remembering the human deck. No celebration, only preparation. And she kept hearing Captain Morrison's voice. The galaxy is bigger than one war. Then the ship's warning chime rang, sharp, urgent. Kira's scales tightened. A communications officer snapped upright. "Commander," the officer called, "we've received a signal." Vexoran stepped forward immediately. "A signal from where?" The officer hesitated. "From the dead zone." The bridge went still. The dead zone was what the Coalition called the region beyond former swarm territory, a wide stretch of space where sensors failed, long-range scans became unreliable, and ships that entered sometimes didn't return. It was a place even the Reinar Swarm avoided. That alone had always frightened the Kovani. Vexoran's eyes narrowed. "Display it." A holographic screen appeared. The signal was old, distorted, broken, but it was repeating, a pattern, a desperate loop. The translator systems worked for several seconds. Then a voice came through. Not Kovani, not Reinar, not any known species. It sounded strained, weak, like someone whispering through blood. "If anyone receives this, do not come closer. Do not." Static. Then again. "We were wrong. The swarm was not the worst. It was running from." Static. Then a final phrase, clearer than the rest. "They are awake." The message repeated, over and over. Kira felt her stomach drop. Vexoran stood very still. Then the door behind them opened. A human voice spoke calmly. "Well," Captain Morrison said, stepping onto the bridge, "that's not ominous at all." Kira turned sharply. Morrison walked forward, hands behind her back, eyes fixed on the signal display. Behind her came Danny Russo,
still recovering but walking on his own now. He looked at the message, then whistled softly. Dead zone distress signal. Classic, Russo muttered. Kira stared at him. How can you say that so casually? She demanded. Russo glanced at her. Because if you don't laugh, you panic. Kira didn't know what to say. Morrison turned to Vexoran. Commander, she said, voice polite but firm. With respect, we can't ignore this. Vexoran met her eyes. You are not Kovani. You are not under my command. Morrison nodded. No, she agreed. Then she said the words that made the bridge go cold. But you are still in the coalition. Vexoran's 4 eyes narrowed. Kira felt trapped between them. Vexoran spoke carefully. The war is over. The coalition agreement ends with it. Morrison smiled slightly. That's what your paperwork says, she replied. Her voice remained calm, but the galaxy doesn't follow paperwork. Kira felt her breath catch. Morrison stepped closer. If something worse than the swarm is out there, then peace is an illusion. She glanced at the signal again, and if the swarm was running from something, her voice lowered, then we should be running too. Vexoran stared at her. You said you would protect those who stand beside you, he said quietly. Morrison's eyes softened slightly. I meant it, she replied. But protection doesn't mean hiding. Russo nodded. We don't do hiding. Kira's chest tightened. Vexoran turned to Kira suddenly. Lieutenant, he said. Yes, Commander. He studied her. Do you remember what I told you? Kira swallowed. Be their friends. Be useful. Yes, she said quietly. Vexoran exhaled slowly. Then he turned back to Morrison. I will not order my fleet into the dead zone, he said firmly. Morrison nodded. Understood. She stepped back. But you won't stop us. Vexoran's eyes narrowed. I cannot, he admitted. Morrison turned toward the door. Send the signal to Earth, she said to her team. Russo followed her. As they walked out, he looked back at Kira. Hey, he said casually, if you guys want to sit this one out, no hard feelings. Then he grinned. But if you come with us, his grin widened. Bring more than wine. The door slid shut behind them. Kira stood frozen. Vexoran stared at the closed door. The bridge crew waited for orders. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, and somewhere ahead, a voice from the dead zone whispered the same warning again. The swarm was not the worst. They are awake. Kira looked at her commander. Are we really going to ignore this? She asked softly. Vexoran's expression was grim. No, he said. Kira's heart lifted slightly. Then he added, we are going to survive it. When the humans entered the dead zone to face whatever the swarm had feared, would they return as allies, or would the galaxy meet a new kind of terror, wearing a human smile?
3 days later, the human ship departed. It was not large like the Kovani flagship. It was not beautiful. It did not shine like a symbol of empire. It looked practical, hard, like a tool built for one purpose. The name painted on its side in bold human letters read, Vigilant. Lieutenant Kira Sol watched from the observation deck as the human vessel drifted away from the fleet. Commander Vexoran stood beside her, silent. Only one ship? Kira asked. Vexoran didn't answer. A human voice behind them did. 2 ships, Captain Morrison corrected. Kira turned. Morrison stood with her hands behind her back, calm as always. Vexoran's eyes narrowed. I see only one. Morrison nodded toward the far side of the deck. Kira followed her gaze. A second shape was there, so small Kira hadn't noticed it at first. A sleek black craft attached to the Vigilant's underside, like a parasite. What is that? Kira asked.
Morrison smiled slightly. "A scouting cutter," she said. "We call it Ghost Knife." Kira didn't like that name. It sounded too honest. Vexoran studied Morrison. "You are going anyway?" he said. "Yes," Morrison replied. "You received no approval from our High Council," Vexoran said. Morrison's eyes stayed steady. "I received approval from Earth." The words carried weight, not arrogance, certainty. Kira felt her stomach tighten. Vexoran spoke quietly. "You truly believe something worse than the swarm is out there?" Morrison didn't answer immediately. She looked out at the stars. Then she nodded. "The swarm didn't build ships like that carrier because it enjoyed it. It built them because it was afraid." Kira swallowed. Russo stepped up beside Morrison, wearing a human flight jacket. His injured hand was wrapped, but he looked stronger than before. "Besides," he said lightly, "if there's a monster out there, someone's got to poke it." Kira stared at him. "You say that like it's normal." Russo shrugged. "Humans are curious. Sometimes curiosity gets us killed." He smiled. "Sometimes it saves everyone else." Vexoran looked away. Kira could see the conflict in him. He wanted to stop them, but he knew he couldn't. Morrison stepped closer to Vexoran. "Commander," she said, voice respectful, "I'm not asking your fleet to follow." Vexoran's eyes narrowed. "Then what are you asking?" Morrison paused. "Information," she said. "Anything you know about that region, any old myths, any lost records." Vexoran was silent. Then he spoke quietly. "The dead zone is older than our charts," he said. "We have legends about it." Kira blinked. "Legends?" Vexoran continued. "Our ancestors called it the sleeping dark." Morrison's face stayed calm, but her eyes sharpened. "Sleeping," she repeated. Vexoran nodded. "They believed something lived there, something so ancient it did not need to move." Kira felt a chill. "Most dismissed it as superstition," Vexoran said, "but the swarm avoided it." Morrison's mouth tightened slightly. "That's not superstition," she murmured. Vexoran's voice lowered. "Our legends say the sleeping dark is not a creature." He paused. "It is a mind." Kira felt her heart thud painfully. "A mind?" Morrison looked at him. "A hive mind?" she asked. Vexoran shook his head slowly. "No, not like the swarm." He swallowed. "Something that does not breed, does not eat, does not conquer." Kira's breath caught. "Then what does it do?" she whispered. Vexoran's eyes darkened. "It waits," he said. Silence. Even Russo stopped smiling. Morrison stared at the stars. "Okay, that's officially the creepiest thing I've heard all month." Russo let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, that's not great." Morrison turned to Vexoran. "If we don't return," she said, "tell your people this wasn't your fault." Vexoran's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you expect to die." Morrison smiled. "I don't expect to die." She glanced at Russo. "I expect to improvise." Russo grinned. "Improvising is our national sport." Kira didn't understand the joke, but she heard the confidence behind it. Morrison stepped back. "Thank you for the warning, Commander," she said. Then she looked at Kira. "You're smart. You listen." Kira blinked. Morrison's voice softened slightly. "Keep doing that." Then Morrison and Russo turned and walked toward the shuttle bay. Kira watched them go. She felt something strange in her chest. Fear, yes, but also respect. And maybe something else, a quiet hope. Because if something worse than the swarm existed, then perhaps the only species reckless enough to face it was also the only species stubborn enough to survive it. Hours later, the Vigilant and its cutter detached completely. Human engines flared. The ship turned toward the dead zone. Kira watched it shrink into the distance. A single ship, two if you counted the cutter, a few dozen humans, heading into a region even the swarm feared. Commander Vexoran stood beside her, silent. Kira finally asked the question she had been holding in her throat. "Do you think they'll come back?" Vexoran stared at the fading light of the human ship. "I do not know," he admitted. Kira's scales felt cold. Then Vexoran added, voice low, "But I know this." He paused. "If they do come back," his eyes narrowed, "they will not come back the same." Kira felt the truth of that settle into her bones. The Vigilant disappeared into the edge of the dead zone. The stars ahead seemed darker than normal, and the repeating distress signal echoed one last time in Kira's mind. They are awake. When the humans finally crossed into the dead zone, what did they find waiting in the darkness? And why would their first discovery shake the Kovani Empire more than any war ever had?
The Vigilant crossed into the dead zone without ceremony. No explosion, no warning, no sudden attack. The stars simply dimmed. Inside the Kovani flagship, long-range sensors tried to follow the human ship's signal. The readings flickered, distorted, then stabilized again, weak but steady. Lieutenant Kira Sol stood over the sensor array, claws tight on the edge of the console. "They're still transmitting," she reported. Commander Vexoran nodded slowly. "Maintain passive monitoring. Do not broadcast." He did not want whatever was inside the dead zone to notice them watching. Hours passed. Then days. The Vigilant sent short updates, sparse, professional. Radiation levels stable, navigation interference increasing, no visual contact. The humans sounded calm. Too calm. On the third day, a longer transmission arrived. Captain Morrison's voice filled the bridge. "We've located the source of the distress signal." Kira leaned closer. "Is it a ship?" Vexoran asked. There was a pause. "No," Morrison said. Another pause. "It's a structure." Kira felt a cold wave roll through her scales. "A structure?" she repeated quietly. Morrison continued. "It's massive, artificial, but it doesn't match any known design." Russo's voice cut in, lighter but tense underneath. "Looks like a star forgot how to die." The transmission shifted to visual feed. The image that appeared on the holoscreen made several officers step back instinctively. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a station. It was something enormous, suspended in empty space. Black, perfectly black. Not reflecting light, not absorbing it, just existing. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no docking bays. Its surface was smooth and curved in impossible ways, like geometry that hurt the eyes if you stared too long. Kira's breath came shallow. "It does not appear damaged," Morrison said, "but it's inactive, no detectable power signature." "Inactive?" Vexoran asked. "Yes." Russo's voice returned, almost amused. "Commander, it's us." Kira felt that strange mix of fear and admiration again. Of course they were boarding it. Of course they were. The transmission shifted to interior suit cams. 6 humans floated toward the black surface. Magnetic boots locked onto it. The surface did not react. No defense systems activated. No alarms. "Entry point located," one human said. They used cutting tools. The black surface resisted at first, then parted silently. The humans slipped inside. The feed turned darker. Interior corridors were vast, empty. No lights, no sound, only the soft breathing of humans inside their helmets. "It's dead," one human whispered. Russo's voice came through. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's what worries me." They moved deeper. Walls curved in strange angles. Symbols covered some surfaces, not written language, but patterns, repeating, complex. Kira stared at the shapes. Her mind hurt trying to follow them. "Captain," a human voice said, "we're approaching the signal source." The corridor opened into a chamber, the size of a city. At the center floated something small compared to the room, a sphere, dim, cracked. Inside it flickered something. Kira leaned forward. "It's a recording device," Morrison said. "Ancient." The humans approached cautiously. As they did, the sphere pulsed weakly. The distress message played again. "We were wrong. The swarm was not the worst. It was running from." The message cut off. Then something changed. The sphere's light flickered stronger, and a new voice filled the chamber. Not broken, not ancient, clear. "Biological entities detected." The Kovani bridge froze. Morrison's voice sharpened. "Back away." The human team stepped backwards. The sphere rotated slowly. "Dormant observation cycle complete. Primary threat assessment updating." Kira's blood ran cold. Vexoran whispered. It was waiting. The sphere's cracks began to glow. "Species analysis. Human. Kovani. Reinar." The last word echoed strangely. "Reinar extinction confirmed." Silence. Then, "Next phase initiated." The fracture in space behind the structure pulsed a little stronger. The tear widened slightly. Not fast, not violently, but undeniably. Kira felt her stomach drop. Behind the structure, there was a tear. Not in metal, not in debris, in space. A thin fracture like cracked glass stretching across the stars. Vexoran stepped closer. "What is that?" he asked. Morrison answered quietly. "We don't know." The bridge fell silent. Russo spoke again, softer now. "It's like space got cut open and never healed." Kira felt fear creeping into her thoughts. "The distress signal?" she asked. Morrison nodded. "It's coming from inside the structure." There was a brief silence. Then Morrison added, "And it's not recent." "How old?" Vexoran asked. "Thousands of years," Morrison replied. The bridge went still. Thousands. Older than the swarm, older than many civilizations. "Can you access it?" Vexoran asked. "We're sending a boarding team," Morrison said. Kira's claws tightened. "Already?" Russo's voice returned, almost amused. "Commander, it's us." Kira felt that strange mix of fear and admiration again. Of course they were boarding it. Of course they were. The transmission shifted to interior suit cams. 6 humans floated toward the black surface. Magnetic boots locked onto it. The surface did not react. No defense systems activated. No alarms. "Entry point located," one human said. They used cutting tools. The black surface resisted at first, then parted silently. The humans slipped inside. The feed turned darker. Interior corridors were vast, empty. No lights, no sound, only the soft breathing of humans inside their helmets. "It's dead," one human whispered. Russo's voice came through. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's what worries me." They moved deeper. Walls curved in strange angles. Symbols covered some surfaces, not written language, but patterns. Repeating, complex. Kira stared at the shapes. Her mind hurt trying to follow them. "Captain," a human voice said, "we're approaching the signal source." The corridor opened into a chamber, the size of a city. At the center floated something small compared to the room. A sphere. Dim. Cracked. Inside it flickered something. Kira leaned forward. "It's a recording device," Morrison said. "Ancient." The humans approached cautiously. As they did, the sphere pulsed weakly. The distress message played again. "We were wrong. The swarm was not the worst. It was running from." The message cut off. Then something changed. The sphere's light flickered stronger, and a new voice filled the chamber. Not broken, not ancient, clear. "Biological entities detected." The Kovani bridge froze. Morrison's voice sharpened. "Back away." The human team stepped backwards. The sphere rotated slowly. "Dormant observation cycle complete. Primary threat assessment updating." Kira's blood ran cold. Vexoran whispered. It was waiting. The sphere's cracks began to glow. "Species analysis. Human. Kovani. Reinar." The last word echoed strangely. "Reinar extinction. Confirmed." Silence. Then, "Next phase initiated." The fracture in space behind the structure pulsed a little stronger. The tear widened slightly. Not fast, not violently, but undeniably. Kira felt her stomach drop. Behind the structure, there was a tear. Not in metal, not in debris, in space. A thin fracture like cracked glass stretching across the stars. Vexoran stepped closer. "What is that?" he asked. Morrison answered quietly. "We don't know." The bridge fell silent. Russo spoke again, softer now. "It's like space got cut open and never healed." Kira felt fear creeping into her thoughts. "The distress signal?" she asked. Morrison nodded. "It's coming from inside the structure." There was a brief silence. Then Morrison added, "And it's not recent." "How old?" Vexoran asked. "Thousands of years," Morrison replied. The bridge went still. Thousands. The dead zone lit up like a wound. From the Kovani flagship, sensor officers watched the readings spike higher and higher. Space itself trembled with energy patterns no one could properly translate. Lieutenant Kira Soul stood frozen at her station. Her eyes stayed locked on the live feed from the human ship. The black structure, silent for thousands of years, was glowing now. Not like a reactor, not like a living creature, like a warning. The fracture in space behind it widened slowly, as if something was prying reality open with invisible hands. Commander Vexoran's voice was low. "Order the fleet to retreat." The bridge crew hesitated. "Commander?" one officer asked. Vexoran's eyes were hard. "This is beyond us," he said. "If the humans fail, we must survive long enough to warn the Empire." Kira's stomach twisted. Retreat. Run. It was logical. It was correct. It was also the most painful thing she had ever heard. On the holoscreen, Captain Morrison's face appeared again, lit by the harsh glow of emergency lights. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp in a way that made Kira's scales tighten. "Commander Vexoran," Morrison said, "you're seeing this?" "Yes," Vexoran replied. Morrison nodded once. "That gate is opening," she said. "We don't know what it is, but it's not Reinar." Vexoran's jaw tightened. "Withdraw," he said. "Now." Morrison stared at the screen for a moment. Then she said something that made Kira's heart drop. "We can't." Vexoran's eyes narrowed. "This is not a request," he said. Morrison's voice stayed steady. "We can't withdraw because if we leave," she said, "whatever comes through that gate will follow." Kira felt the truth of it hit her like cold water. If this thing had been waiting for thousands of years, then the moment it woke up, it wouldn't stop. It would move, it would spread, it would learn, and the galaxy would never get another warning. Russo's voice cut in. "Also, he said, trying to sound light. "If we run now, we'll just die later. Might as well die in a place where we can shoot back." Kira's claws dug into her console. Vexoran stared at the screen. "You do not understand what this is," he said. Morrison's mouth tightened slightly. "No," she admitted, "but I understand one thing." She leaned closer to the camera. "If the swarm was running from it," she said, "then this is the real enemy." Silence. Then Morrison's tone shifted. Not softer, stronger. "We're staying." Vexoran's eyes burned. "You are reckless," he said. Morrison's expression didn't change. "Yes," she agreed. Then she added quietly, "And you're alive because of it." Kira's chest tightened. Vexoran didn't answer, because he couldn't deny it. The human ship moved closer to the black structure. The cutter Ghost Knife detached and circled behind, scanning the fracture. Energy patterns pulsed. A low hum vibrated through the transmission. The gate widened, and something began to appear. At first, Kira thought it was a ship, but then she realized it had no hull, no plating, no design. It looked like a shadow shaped into a blade, a vast, shifting form sliding through the tear in space like liquid darkness. The sensor officer beside Kira whispered, "Stars preserve us." Vexoran didn't move. He simply stared. The thing continued emerging, and as it did, Kira's console lit up with warnings. Not weapon locks, not heat signatures, something else. "Mental interference detected," the console flashed. Kira blinked. Mental? Then she felt it, a pressure, not on her skin, on her mind. A slow, crushing weight pressing against her mind like a hand. Her breath caught. Around her, officers flinched. Some grabbed their heads. One stumbled backward. "What is happening?" Kira whispered. Vexoran's voice was strained. "It's reaching," he said. On the human feed, Russo's voice came through. "Yeah, that's not a ship killer." Kira's throat tightened. "What is it?" Russo's answer came quietly. "It's a mind killer." Morrison's voice cut in immediately. "Vigilant, fire." The human ship unleashed everything. Plasma, rail rounds, missiles. The space around the shadow lit up with explosions. But the shadow didn't flinch. The attacks passed through it like light through smoke. Kira felt her stomach drop. Weapons did nothing. The shadow turned slightly. And then it looked at the human ship. Not with eyes, with attention. Kira felt the pressure in her mind spike. The humans on the feed staggered. Some grabbed their helmets. Morrison's voice tightened. "Hold the line." Russo laughed once, short, harsh. "Oh, great. Now it noticed us." The shadow drifted closer. The black structure pulsed. The gate behind it stayed open, as if waiting for more. Vexoran's voice broke through urgently. "Captain Morrison, withdraw. You cannot fight this." Morrison's eyes were burning now. "No," she said. She leaned closer to the camera. "Commander," she said softly, "this is what we're good at." Then her voice hardened. "We don't run from monsters." Kira's chest tightened. The shadow reached towards the Vigilant, and for the first time in the entire war, Lieutenant Kira Soul watched humans face something they could not shoot, something they could not outfight, something they could not understand. And they stayed anyway. Not because they believed they would win, but because they refused to let anyone else die first. When weapons failed and the enemy attacked the mind itself, what desperate human trick did Morrison use next? And would it save the Kovani fleet, or doom them all?
The shadow reached for the Vigilant. Every sensor on the Kovani flagship screamed at once. Mental interference spiked. Several officers collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads. Lieutenant Kira Soul felt the crushing pressure inside her mind grow heavier, like invisible claws trying to pry her thoughts apart. On the screen, human crew members staggered, but they did not fall. Captain Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. "Switch to pattern black." The words meant nothing to Kira, but the humans reacted instantly. Inside the Vigilant, lights dimmed, non-essential systems shut down. The ship's emissions dropped to almost nothing. The vessel went quiet. Not powerless, quiet. Russo's strained voice came through. "Masking our neural signature," he said through clenched teeth. "If it hunts minds, we give it static." Kira blinked. Static? The shadow pressed closer. The Vigilant's hull shimmered as a low, chaotic pulse spread from the ship. Irregular, messy, unpredictable. On Kira's console, the mental interference patterns around the human ship became distorted. Not blocked, confused. Vexoran's eyes widened. "They're scrambling their own thought patterns," he whispered. Kira stared. The humans were deliberately disrupting their neural signals, flooding their own minds with chaotic noise so the entity could not isolate them. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was very human. The shadow hesitated, just slightly. The pressure in Kira's skull eased by a fraction. Morrison's voice came again, sharp and focused. "Ghost knife, target the structure, not the entity." Russo understood immediately. If the gate closes, the dog loses its leash. The small cutter ship peeled away and fired everything it had at the ancient black structure. Not the shadow, the gate. The fracture in space pulsed violently as explosions struck the structure's surface. For the first time, the black surface cracked. Light, bright and unnatural, leaked out. The ancient voice echoed again. "Interference unacceptable. Escalation initiated." The shadow surged toward the Vigilant. Morrison didn't hesitate. "All ships," she said calmly, including the Kovani channel now. "Target the fracture. Overload it." Vexoran stared at the screen. "If that gate destabilizes, it collapses," Morrison finished. "And," he demanded, "and whatever's on the other side doesn't get through." Her voice was steady. "But neither do we." Silence hit the bridge. Kira understood. They were too close. If the gate imploded, the blast would consume the structure and the Vigilant. Vexoran's voice was tight. "Captain, you will not survive that." Morrison met her gaze through the transmission. Her expression was calm. "We knew that when we stayed." Kira felt tears sting her eyes. Russo leaned into frame, bruised and bleeding, but grinning faintly. "Tell your people," he said, "we weren't running." The shadow struck the human ship. Lights flickered violently. Several humans collapsed. The chaotic neural pulse faltered. Morrison steadied herself against a console. "All human vessels," she ordered. "Final strike, now." The ghost knife fired everything left. The Vigilant followed. Vexoran turned to his bridge crew. He had one choice: run and watch the humans die alone, or stand beside them. He remembered his own words: "Be their friends." He lifted his hand. "All Kovani ships," he commanded, voice ringing through the bridge. "Target the fracture." Kira felt her heart slam against her ribs. "Fire!" The Kovani fleet unleashed everything: beams, missiles, plasma arcs. The fracture screamed with energy. The black structure shattered further. The gate wavered. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if tethered to the opening. Morrison's voice came one last time. "Commander Vexoran." "Yes," he answered. "Good luck." Then she cut the transmission. The gate collapsed. Not outward, inward. Space folded violently into itself. The black structure imploded, pulled into the shrinking tear. The shadow twisted, stretched, and vanished. The dead zone went silent. No explosion reached the Kovani fleet. Just a sudden absence. A stillness so complete it felt wrong. Kira stared at the sensor board. "Gate signature gone," she whispered. The pressure in her mind disappeared completely. The nearest Kovani cruiser flickered. Its systems rebooted slowly. Lights came back online. Vexoran stepped forward. Scan for the vigilant. The sensor officer swallowed. No signal. Ghost knife. Nothing. Silence filled the bridge. The humans were gone. Not drifting, not damaged. Gone. The dead zone returned to darkness. Empty again. Weeks later, memorials were held across Kovani space, not only for fallen warriors of the war, but for the humans who entered the darkness and did not return. Captain Kate Morrison, Danny Russo, the crew of the Vigilant. Their names were added to Kovani monuments, not as outsiders, as defenders. Lieutenant Kira Sol stood beside Commander Vexoran at the largest ceremony on Kovani Prime. "You were right," she said quietly. Vexoran did not look at her. "About what?" "About humans." He stayed silent for a moment. "Yes," he said, "they are terrifying." Kira nodded slowly. "But they are also," she searched for the right word, "loud." Vexoran glanced at her, confused. She smiled faintly. "They refuse to be silent." She looked up at the stars. They refused to let the galaxy end quietly. Vexoran followed her gaze. Somewhere beyond the dead zone, the fracture was gone, sealed, for now. "Do you think it's over?" Kira asked. Vexoran thought about the ancient voice. New cycle begins. He thought about humans' endless curiosity, their refusal to run, their habit of preparing for the next threat before the last one was buried. "No," he said honestly, "it is never over." Kira felt that truth settle inside her. The galaxy was vast, ancient, full of sleeping things, but now it also held something else, a species that would chase monsters into the dark, a species that would scramble its own thoughts just to deny an enemy control, a species that would collapse a gate knowing it would not return. Humans were fragile, soft, breakable, and yet they were the loudest answer the universe had ever received. Vexoran finally spoke again, voice steady. "If the darkness ever wakes again," he said, "I pray humanity wakes with it." Kira nodded, because she understood now. The swarm had feared the sleeping dark. The galaxy feared the swarm. But when the true enemy stirred, only one species had stepped forward without hesitation. Not because they were fearless, but because they refused to let fear decide. And somewhere, perhaps beyond understanding, perhaps beyond death itself, the echo of human defiance lingered in the silent stars. The galaxy had learned a harsh truth. Humans were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest. They were not the most advanced. But they were the ones who refused to be erased. And sometimes that was enough. In a universe filled with ancient horrors and silent gates, one truth remains. If something wakes in the dark again, humanity will be there, and the galaxy will never face it alone. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.